I will try to write the night down the way the bureau taught me to file things, plainly, with dates in the margin that mean something only to those trained to read them. But this night will not be plain. It resists the margins, it wants to wriggle free. So I will file it with honesty instead, which in a building that staples metaphors is probably the least orderly thing to do. We came back to the plan like people coming back to a temperate argument, each word checked for tone. Owen arrived first, his coat dragging small ideas behind it, his constellation tie a careless map to the impossible. He had unrolled a length of ledger ribbon like a cat showing its prey, possessive, proud, and useless in a fight unless someone remembered how to use it. Mies. Ledger arrived with a stack of forms folded like small reasons. They gave her shoulders a seriousness she wore like a badge, but she tucked a charm into the lapel of one folder as she always did. And for a second I saw the woman who once flung a regulation into a weather festival and saved a town. I had Dot in my pocket. Dot's appetite for marginalia is almost musical. It hummed when it tasted the edge of our plan. It is the size of a semicolon and the mood of an ellipsis. I had bribed it with a warm pastry, and it had placed that pastry beside the bait that would tempt the slip. The bait was in the end a very small and very sad glove mirror. Pockets had kept in a drawer marked, maybe the sort of orphaned thing the slip loves because it stands just off the script of whatever day belonged to it. Sally timed the elevator. I know that for the readers who do not work in places where floors themselves remember their mistakes, this sounds theatrical. But timing an elevator here matters. Press the wrong button in the wrong order, and you arrive on a Thursday that happened to be Tuesday for reasons that will only embarrass you later. She hummed as she worked, a tune like a swing door closing. Her hands were precise. She had the habit of pressing the button twice, once for the elevator, once for luck. We set the room up like a banquet for ghosts. Documents that had once been arguments between townspeople and mayors lay in neat rows. The staplers we used that night had names: consent, supposition, noon. Owen laid them out with a showman's attention. He likes to make ritual look like theater. He always says that ceremony helps people believe they are doing something sacred, and the belief is half the magic. Mies. Ledger muttered through a checklist and used postage as punctuation, her voice a dry pencil on the margin of my nerves. The plan itself read like something out of a child's picture book and a bureaucrat's worst dream. We would anchor the slip with a stapling ritual, literal teeth of metal puncturing the air between ordered signatures, and close the fold with a signature loop. Registrar Amy would process the requisition as if every stamp mattered, because in the bureau, of course, every stamp matters. Harmon had lent us his humming vault key, which was a metal thing that sang like a reluctant baritone when wound. It was a key to the place where denied amendments go to sleep. I held it and felt something that might have been courage or might have been nostalgia for my mother's organized kitchen. I will not lie, I was terrified. Not of the slip entirely, I've always been scared of things that don't write their own reasons, but of the possibility that my hands would tremble and the stamp would smear, that a comma would go missing and take with it an afternoon of someone I loved. There is a soft, animal panic that comes when you see your error's face reflected in other people's lives. I wanted to prove I belonged. I wanted to fix what I broke. I wanted ridiculously, domestically, to be the sort of person who could make the clock hands obey. Owen told a joke while he prepared the staples. He makes jokes the way other people make coffee, to keep themselves awake. If the slip thinks it can slip through stapler teeth, it's never met my aunt's sewing kit, he said. And he laughed at his own punchline like it was a rehearsal of bravery. Ms. Ledger did not laugh. She looked at the ledger ribbon and at the chorus of forms and then at me, as if measuring how much stupidity and how much courage I contained. Remember, she said, and nothing in her voice suggested an option. Paperwork holds weight. Not all weight is bad. Some weight is gravity. Some weight is ballast. And some weight is a dessert fork, Owen whispered, which made Dot titter in the margin. We began. Registrar Amy handled the stamps with the sort of detached affection librarians reserve for rare bindings. Her hand was steady. She impressed a seal that smelled faintly of lemon and legal counsel. Harmon wound the humming key until the metal sang and the room vibrated like a throat clearing. Owen held the ritual staples like a priest holding rosary beads. When he drove the first staple into the ledger ribbon and the main requisition, the sound was small and bright, like someone flicking light on after an interminable power failure. This is where the slip made its first small joke. It slid into the room like a smudge you notice only from the corner of your eye. It was both less and more than I expected, a darkening that moved like handwriting, a shadow that left crumbs of erased ink. There were no arms to grab, no teeth to bite. Instead, it offered us a voice like cold typewriter keys. Hello, it said. It did not make the room cold. It made memory feel like a photograph you could reframe. I wondered whether you would try this again. It spoke to me. It could have addressed Ledger or Harmon's authority or Amy's seals, but it drifted toward me because I was the most likely to wobble. It does not matter who I am. It matters that I remember schedules and good lists. It could smell my childhood tidy city in my parents' calendar. That scent, I now know, is armor and leather both. The slip knew it. It offered me things while we worked. A vision of my mother crossing days off without hesitation, a town in which nothing was lost, a ledger of birthdays that never blurred. The slip's promises were not threats. They were comforts. You could have the neatness you crave. It murmured, a life without a stray sock, without the small H that sits like lint behind your eye. You could make your mother proud of you for keeping everything tidy. Would you not want that? It was persuasive because it spoke in the voice of something very old, the wish to undo discomfort by editing it out. It knew that my weakness was the habit of following rules, of believing the world could be made obedient by forms. I felt for the first time that day the seductive whisper of perfection. And then a paper ran off. Mies, ledger cursed but softly. Keep the line, she said, and I could hear the exhalation of a woman trying to keep herself from folding into panic. Keep the line and breathe. Owen countered the slip's lullaby with a ridiculous little anthem about staplers. He rattled off the litany of staples we had: consent, supposition, noon. We have noon. There was a childishness to it that felt like pulling a bandage off, sharp and freeing. Dot hopped off my shoulder, excited. It darted to the bait glove and left a smear of annotation like a kiss before it sat on the edge of the ledger ribbon, ready to nibble whatever small inconsistency might push the slip's curiosity into a trap. We did the paper chase the way one chases a mischievous cat, with hands fast, hearts stubborn. A memo stack toppled. Mies. Ledger and Owen rescued it together, and in that brief contact, I saw an old intimacy, two people who had once debated the ethics of postage and decided to stay friends anyway. Harmon recited the procedural poetry that keeps a vault from mail losing its mind. Registrar Amy stamped like an oracle, and each imprint sounded like a footstep being put down where it belonged. For a moment the trap seemed to hold. The ribbon tightened. The staples caught the edges of shapes that had no business taking edges. The humming key thrummed like a restrained animal. I felt that improbable lightness that people call hope, a small buoy in the flood of the day's problems. Voices rose into a single, ridiculous cadence: stamp, staple, seal, loop. The slip grew impatient, or bored, or both. It changed tactics. Instead of tempting me with neatness, it flirted with me through possibility. It showed me a calendar where a week I had spent worrying was instead spent laughing with someone whose shoes I couldn't stop watching. It offered, in the voice of a wink, a life where every annoyance was turned into a small, curated wonder. The temptation was cunning. It offered not a Resha, but a kinder world, where the city's lobster mayor was a local mascot, and where forgotten umbrellas returned with polite notes. Why staple suffering shut? It asked. Why sign away the little bright windows that make life unreadable in the most human way? Are you so afraid of a lobster hat that you would let a child never learn to tie a ribbon? This is a rhetorical question the slip loves because it makes you do the math. The arithmetic is complicated. What is the value of surprise? What does stability cost in human warmth? The slip makes a ledger of morality about the carelessness of joy. Its voice is full of pity and mischief. I wanted to answer it, but answers are expensive when everyone is holding tools. Owen, who had not been aiding the slip's flattery, whispered to me from behind a leaning tower of amendments. "Don't be seduced by the polite side of chaos," he said. "Chaos that is courteous is still chaos, staple it." His voice had a tremor. He was scared too. I recognized that fear is democratic in a room where lunch is a legal deadline and the city might acquire a permanent crustacean in the mayoral wardrobe. I moved to help drive the final staple. The staple felt heavier than metal should. Perhaps this is always the way when you are trying to clamp a world. You imagine the tool as the solution, and then you discover the tool understands too much about the fabric of things. My hand shook. The slip's voice filled the small space between my ribs with possibility. The humming key vibrated. Harmon hummed with it. Registrar Amy's thumb left a dot of ink, precise as a constellation. We exhaled together as if preparing to jump. Then the ink smudged. It was the sort of accretion that can happen in any office. Moisture on a thumb, the breath of a nervous clerk. But in the bureau, the consequences are not minor. The smudge fetched itself like a stray and unrolled into a small shadow that slithered across the paper, and where it touched the signature space, the seal came out bloodless. It was not a theatrical slip. It was the quiet, humiliating betrayal of a tool that had decided to be human. Owen swore in a way that stirred the dust in the air. Ms. Ledger's face blanked for a fraction and then reordered itself into something like command. Harmon cursed with a historical noun. Registrar Amy's hand hovered above the seal, as if trying to find a place unharmed. All of us froze because in the bureau a smudge is not mere accident. It is a symptom, the slip smiled. I could have sworn the skiff of erased ink had a lip. "You see," it said, as if this had all been part of a lecture. "Even your stamps betray you. Perfection is a fragile pronoun." And in that smile was a sly, wry invitation to pick the alternate path, let go, let the world keep some of its strayness. Sign the exemption that would be kinder and live with the rest. It was an offering of humility disguised as conquest. It promised me a life where my mother's lists stayed intact and my small anxieties were line-itemed away. I felt, for a moment, like a child who has been offered a cookie in exchange for telling the truth about whether they broke the vase. The temptation was not to be cruel but to be comfortable. I tasted it and liked the sugar. I liked the image of a life where the clocks ticked in a chorus I could count on. But then I thought of Mabel's soup and the way she had served us a prophecy that tasted like onion and regret. I thought of Owen's hoarded file and how he had kept something inconvenient because it mattered more than tidy records. I thought of the glove in the bait and how one small, silly thing could be someone's entire story. The slip's offers were not only comforting. They were erasures arranged like gifts. They would smooth away edges until nothing caught the light. I refused, not with a dramatic flourish. I simply pressed the staple driver down and felt the metal bite into the ledger ribbon. The room made a halting, hungry sound of relief when the staple took. Registrar Amy arched and stamped the seal. The humming key thrummed down into a calmer pitch. For a second we had succeeded. The slip thrashed against the confines like a fish in a net. And then a paper slid from a shelf and brushed the floor, making silence like a winter breath. I bent to pick it up and one of my glasses slid down my nose. When I adjusted them, the signature we had thought crisp had smeared into a blotchy hedgerow. Between breath and breath, the seal failed. It was not the dramatic failure I feared, no thunderclap, no rupture, but a quiet, stupid thing, an inked thumb where the law needed a name. The slip slipped. There is a specific sound the slip makes when it departs. It is like someone taking a pen from a desk and closing a tent flap. It leaves crumbs of erased ink and a faint scent of worry. It does not shout victory. It sachets and leaves a postscript, a comma where a period should be, a marginalia that will become a rumor. It is not violent, it is corrective. It is the sort of creature that will rearrange your lost week into a pleasant afternoon for some child across town and call it art. The room went still as though the world had been turned down a notch. Papers lay still. Harmon caught the humming key and turned it back inside his pocket with hands that were suddenly very sure again. Registrar Amy scrubbed at the smear with the same cloth she uses to polish seals and started a new requisition, her face set like an old coin mise. Ledger breathed and then began to organize the aftermath with the authority of someone who has, in the past, persuaded storms to keep their rain in polite cups. We were raw and comic and relieved and angry all at once. "We nearly had it," Owen said, and his voice was like a man who has almost plucked a song from the air. He looked at me with eyes that wanted to be proud and unsure whether he had that right. I realized I had been holding my breath so long my chest hurt. "We almost had it," Mies Ledger echoed, but there was something tender under her sternness. She folded a slightly smudged form into the correct folder and wrote on it like making a small altar. "We will try again," she said, and the certainty in her voice was a small, stubborn comfort. I wanted to be angry at myself. I wanted to write a note to every stapler and apologize for their involvement. I wanted to apologize to the glove. Instead, I let myself feel something that was not shame so much as a sober, ridiculous grief. We had been close enough to feel the slip's argument on the skin of our wishes. That means we have to decide what we do with those wishes. We left the room in a clumsy procession. Dot hopped into my palm and left a small trail of marginalia on my skin that will probably never wash out fully. Sally clicked the elevator buttons in a new rhythm, one for the floor, one for a superstition. Outside, the hall smelled of toner and the dusk of a bureaucratic day. A clerk passed us with a stack of forms stamped routine, and he did not know what had just grazed the edges of his life. The city's clocks were beginning to cough lunchtime. Somewhere above us a ribbon of traffic blurred, and the mayor's small lobster companion made an appearance on the local feed, amicably waving a small claw. We failed and we learned. Failure smells like old paper and coffee. It tastes like pastry and the metallic edge of a staple. It moved us, somehow, toward a plan that was not entirely mechanical. Whoever wrote the handbook that says do not anthropomorphize your errors had never sat in a basement and watched a smudge lecture you about mercy. The thing that keeps me awake that night is not only regret for the smudged signature but the slip's gentle question, what would you give up to keep a tidy life? I do not know the answer. Maybe that is what the slip wanted. Maybe it will be back to ask again. We have a new list of tasks. Harmon suggested a different kind of staple and emotional latch, he called it, which sounds absurd until you remember that he once saved a flood with a petition. Registrar Amy wants an extra silk pad for the next seal, because she says moisture is the enemy of law, Mies. Ledger will teach me how to write a looped memorandum that makes a fork in the sequence, a legal paradox big enough to hold a creature of margins. Owen promised, in the softest possible way, to stop hiding the file and to try to mend it instead. Dot promised to keep eating annotations, but only after it finishes the pastry I gave it. I made a note to apologize to the staplers and to teach my hands not to tremble when necessary. We will try again. The building's clocks will tolerate us for a little longer, and our lunch hour will not yet be the sealing hour if we are clever and if our stamps keep their temper. We are a messy species of administrative muscle. We trip over our own tethered red tape, and then we get up and tape it tighter. There is something human in that, unbearable and stubborn. I walked back to my desk with a folder marked near misses and a heart that felt like a stapled list. The smell in the air was the same toner and distant thunder, and if I had closed my eyes I could have imagined the slip still watching from the margin, amused and expectant. The ending of this chapter is not an ending at all. It is the hinge of a door. The slip has retreated, but it left behind crumbs of possibility and a catalogue of what I almost agreed to lose. We nearly caught a creature born of mistakes. We nearly perfected an imperfect world. We failed at the very moment we proved we could succeed. That is probably the closest thing to a victory this building can teach, the ability to fail and to keep filing. I sat, opened my folder, and wrote a single note in the margin. It was small and embarrassing and full of hope. Try again. Pack a dry cloth. Then the noon bell began to toll. The sound rolled through the bureau like a reminder that the world will always insist on lunch. We started toward the break room, humbled, hungry, and strangely ready. The slip has not been cornered, but the chase has been made explicit. That is a particular kind of progress. I folded the margin of the note inward, like tucking a letter under a pillow, and I kept walking. The hook is a small, human one. Will our next attempt be kind enough to catch the slip without making a martyr of our own misgivings? Will my hand keep steady long enough? And, perversely, what will the mayor's lobster wear for dinner? The building holds its breath and then, obediently, goes to lunch. I learned early that paper remembers things people want to forget, and forgets things they want to keep. The supply room smelled like toner and a rain that was not yet official. I found them there, a neat, terrifying stack of Form 42Bs, their headers misprinted in a way that felt like a joke told badly. Where the header should have read Corrective Chronology Form 42B, a smear of ink had turned the words into something stranger, conflating chronologies Form 42C. The margin barcodes hummed the wrong tune when I ran my fingers along them. For a second, the paper seemed to look back at me with the polite indifference of a thing that knows a secret and intends to keep it. I knew what those forms could do. I had only just learned to carry one without apologizing to it, to present its corners like a flag of competence. But that stack 3 reams, maybe more, had been printed in a batch that someone in procurement had never been told to proof. Or perhaps procurement had told itself something comforting and then tired. What mattered was that they were out, and that outness was contagious. When I lifted the top copy, the corridor did an odd trick. Footsteps skittered backward and forward at once, like a record player with a hiccup. Someone's laughter arrived a heartbeat early. A janitor pushing a cart past me twice, once with a mop, once with an immaculate calm I did not yet deserve. The building, I realized with the heavy, sudden clarity of a bad metaphor becoming literal, was replaying its pockets to see what had fallen through. August. Ms. Ledger's voice, calm and brittle as a well-used ledger, came from the doorway. She was always in doorways at the wrong time for me, discovery times, or instruction times, or those times when she chose to sigh. What have you found? I held the sheet up like evidence and felt my face go the exact wrong color for someone who worked with toner. They say conflating, I said. All of them. She inspected the header as if checking a patient's pulse. Not good. Procurement will deny it, then someone will deny procurement, then we'll stand in a ring of denials until lunch. There was a way the bureau joked about its own bureaucracy, punctuation as a talisman, stamps as charms, memos folded like prayers, but the laugh didn't stick this time. Is it, can we reprint? I asked. Her eyes were tired in a way that made them old-fashioned. We can. But reprinting is decisive. Decisiveness is a machine's favorite currency. We don't want to pay for that just yet. It was true. The word decide here had been bought and sold too many times, often for cheaper things, efficiency, quotas. The comforting belief that if you could eliminate uncertainty, you would have eliminated harm. Machines like decisiveness. People messy, flawed, syrupy people did not. We did not have the luxury of philosophizing. A commotion rose from the atrium as if a kettle had been loosened. When we went out, the clocks were doing something I had never seen in a building that took time like a contract. The grand clock in the central atrium tugged at its hands and answered with three tailing chimes. A smaller, brass desk clock that had belonged to Chief Archivist Harmon Vance's grandfather gave a single plaintive tick that burst into a memory of two ticks. Somewhere near the mailroom, a pocket watch, proud and Victorian, whispered a lullaby and then coughed. The sounds were layered: yesterday's noon, today's noon, and tomorrow's noon, trying on each other's shoes. The atrium echoed with a chorus that wasn't music so much as a building sneezing in three different registers. Memos on a passing cart fluffed themselves into the air like startled pigeons and rearranged their own envelopes. A credit request stamped itself urgent, and then, in a quieter ink, no, wait. The staple machine, our small, municipal Zeus, was jammed in a way that made it whimper in the corner. People moved through the atrium like they were stepping through puddles in two different rainstorms. The news wasn't just aesthetic. Conflating had teeth. Where a single misprinted form could tinker with a Tuesday by nudging it a degree earlier or later, an entire released run could invite weekdays to overlap. It was as if the town had been given multiple drafts of its week, and the drafts decided to be helpful and share chapters. A coffee ordered at 10:07 arrived at 9:54 to the confusion of its recipient and the owner's later self. A clerk checking the ledger jotted a note in the margin and then found, with growing horror, the very same note already printed in a handwriting she had not yet learned. It is an odd thing to watch a minor life unweave. Me. Pockets, the custodian of single gloves, stray thoughts, and orphaned umbrellas, was particularly susceptible to ledgering errors because his own job is made of small, misplaced things. He might have been a person with habits, or he might have been the pattern of his habits written down and handed around on cheap paper. It took a while to tell which, when he simply did not stand behind his usual folding table of found mittens. There was first a whisper, someone assuming he'd stepped out for tea, and then a panic that slid from stomach to throat. A space where he should be hummed. Someone found a scrap of his scarf pinned under a bureaucratic notice, and when they brought it to Harmon, he inhaled a slow, precise breath. Harmon, who looked like someone who would prefer continuity to a sudden party, produced a humming vault key from his coat, as if keys could translate absence into a song. "Is not in the ledger," he said with a calm that didn't belong to anyone. "Not in a way that will hold. There's a gap where he should be, like a missing chord." Ami crouched on the linoleum and examined the gap with the kind of concentration that could make deadlines weep. She had a little stamp-shaped freckle on her palm and a knack for finding where names like to hide. "He exists if we say he exists," she said simply, and produced a lemon-brown stamp that smelled faintly of old library glue. She struck it in the air, and the scent condensed into the shape of a footstep. "Meh." Pocket's cap bobbed up like a creature surfacing, and he blinked, holding a glove that reeked faintly of myth. We cheered in a small, embarrassed way. You cheer in the bureau when someone is recovered because cheering is cheaper than admitting you were afraid of being wrong. But the recovery, though sweet, felt like a bandage on a widening wound. Word spread fast, as it does in offices where gossip is a sanctioned form. At once, the automation faction found its voice. This faction, half bright-eyed municipal technocrats and half panicked supervisors, had been waiting for a problem like this to justify their machine. It was polished and efficient on brochures, and it smelled like a promise to the wary. No more messy judgment calls, no more living with the bother of small, beautiful errors. It would grind anomalies down until they fit the bureau's neat cereal boxes. They came with a demonstration. The machine was a thing of chrome and narrow, confident lines. It hummed like a well-trained choir when someone pressed a test button. Its brochure's headline was stamped in a font that suggested capital improvements and noncommittal inevitability. Mies. Ledger watched the demonstration with her fingers doing that rhythm she did when she was keeping tally. It would do the job swiftly, she said aloud, for no one in particular. It would be merciless, Owen laughed, a sound like someone untying a knot with a fork. "Mercilessness can be merciful," he said, but his eyes watched me then in a way that suggested he was measuring my trembling. He had his hands in his pockets and a coffee stain that looked like a constellation on the sleeve of his coat. "It would save us lunch, at least. If the machine could file, stamp, and ultimately excise anything unclean or unproductive, it could also strip a dozen small delights that no one could quite quantify until they were gone. Mabel's soup might have a tendency to rain on a certain lover's sorrow on Tuesdays. That would be gone. The mayor's lobster hat absurd, charming, diplomatically useful might be polished into a memory the machine would regard as a diplomatic irregularity. Owen's hoarded file, his private, inconvenient relic, would be catalogued, boxed, and placed in a neat coma. The slip, which had been an amused smudge for weeks, left its calling card on the demonstration brochure, a smear on the chrome where it read like a signature. A tiny crumb of erased ink fell onto the table. It was as if the slip had gone into a private dream, and then come out to say, in the tone of a barista who refuses to name their own lat, "I might approve." I should have felt confident. I was an intern who had screwed up, and was now trying to fix it. My training, such as it was, taught me forms and order. My upbringing had taught me that schedules were promises. But my hands kept shaking when I held a stamp. I had, somewhere in the early hours of this calamity, written an apologetic note to a stapler and filed it under maybe. When the automation pitch began its soft, industrial hymn, I felt small and obsolete in the way a person feels when they witness a well-oiled duplicate of themselves. That was when someone suggested the blunt solution. "We run the machine on the misprinted run," a cheerful technician proposed, as if suggesting the use of a toaster on jammy bread. "We will standardize the issue. One timeline, one clean correction, and everything that didn't belong will be overwritten." The room split into a dozen polite silences. Ms. Ledger folded her hands. Harmon propped his spectacles on the tip of his nose and looked like a judge considering mercy. Owen chewed the end of his metaphorical pen and then snapped it back with a sound like a surrender. Amy grayed for half a breath and then grew purposeful. "It would work," Harmon said, which was a terrible kind of reassurance. "It would work because the machine does not hesitate. But we would be paying a different sort of price. There are kindnesses and errors that don't look like kindnesses when you measure them." He was right. I pictured all the odd, small things we had accidentally cultivated, two ex-lovers who met on a misfiled park bench and became friends. A rain that fell only on the grieving and made them feel attended. A stray cat who belonged to no one and kept the mayor's lobster hat company, and I realized, with the same clarity that arrives when you misplace a photograph, that some of those things were human scaffolding. Machines do not scaffold, they replace. My chest felt too full for language. The day had condensed into a precious system, misprinted forms, overlapping weekdays. Mere. Pockets gone for a moment, the machine's glossy promise and the slip's smug signature. I thought of my mother, who had a habit of labeling jars of preserves with not only dates but the weather of the day. As if the jam tasted better if you remembered that it had been cold and angry when it was made. I pictured my neat little jars of memory and felt the urge to protect them. "We need a plan that keeps people," I said. My voice surprised me by not shaking. "Not just a tidy week." Ms. Ledger's eyes softened for a fraction of a second when the ledger in her coat seemed to sigh. "Then make one," she said. "You will not be making it alone. There was work to be done." Amy and Harmon began to catalogue the consequences with the kind of methodical grief the Bureau reserves for important things. Owen and I ran inventory on human variables who could be lost and still be recovered, who would vanish if we took a particular route. Dot offered suggestions in ellipses and crumbs, which was as useful as it sounded. The slip, for its part, amused itself by rearranging the punctuation on a few memos so that sincerely became sign, cry. We worked like a small animal hunkering down for a storm. Registrar Amy printed an emergency batch of corrected forms proofed carefully under M's. Ledger's watchful crease, but she did not distribute them until we designed a counterpoint, a curated list of anomalies to preserve. We would try to reseal sequence broadly, but we would not pay for that resealing with every small kindness. It is hard, in the middle of a crisis, to decide which misfiles deserve reprieve and which must be corrected. Choices become almost unbearably moral: keep a lobster hat that makes the mayor kinder, or correct the mayor into a day when there is no lobster at all. Preserve a rain that goes only to the sorrowful, or return weather to its bland impartiality. I felt simultaneously noble and ridiculous for caring about such specific robins of error. We had an idea: anchor the corrected timeline but tuck a small booklet of allowed anomalies into the vault as part of the official exception. Harmon would sign the exception. Me's ledger would witness. Owen would perform some theatrical act we all pretended not to find touching. And I would compile the list with the terrible, careful affection of a librarian who knows more than the catalogue. It was a plan built of gentleness and loopholes. It was not a machine's dream. It was prone to error and to being misunderstood. But then so were people. Lunchtime approached with the implacable punctuality of a thing that is used to being obeyed. The building's clocks found their rhythm at last, settling into a tempo that felt like marching out of a crowded theater, slow, breathless, and ready to judge the lights. We had not trapped the slip, and there was ink in the margins, but we had chosen messy, human choice for now. The machine's brochures sat unopened on a side table like a temptation in chrome. As we gathered our papers and our wills, the slip made one light, almost polite mischief, a little smudge on my file that looked suspiciously like a smile. It was not a promise to stay away. It was not even a threat. It was, as everything from the margins tended to be, a mock invitation to continue the conversation. We would continue. We would not, I resolved, give up the small wrongnesses without a fight worthy of their flavor. But I also knew, in the place where worry and courage shake hands, that we would have to be fast, patient, and a little cruel to ourselves. The day had redoubled its misfile. Next we would decide whether to stamp a single, tidy correction or to draft a stubborn, human exception. I walked back to my desk with my blazer too big and my pockets full of stamps. The atrium's clocks chimed 11, and for the first time since morning their chorus sounded like a church that had decided to sing off key and be proud of it. I set a single form 42B on the ledger in front of me, pressed my thumb against the edge where the ink blurred in a polite, furious way, and began to write the first name on a list I intended to keep. The lunch bell officious, unavoidable began to prepare itself. We had, in the afternoon's short reach, an agreement to make. It would require signatures, a vault key, a theatrical staple, a pastry for Dot, and something else I could not yet name. A willingness to sacrifice the neatness I had once loved for the people who loved untidiness right back. Outside, a town braced, not knowing yet whether its next noon would be clean or deliciously wrong. Inside, a small and exhausted committee leaned toward a compromise. I felt small, yes. I felt terrified, yes. But there was also a new warmth in my chest, like someone had finally, mercifully, put a scarf around a drafty idea. And the slip always there, a delightful smudge, left one more crumb on my desk. A page torn from some forgotten ledger in which the word maybe had been stamped by many hands. It seemed a good place to start.